Well, I'm pretty sure our audience has a lot of questions to be raised now. So, in that sense, I would like to open the forum for discussion. Before doing so, let me now introduce you to our moderator for the day, a second-year medical student at the University of Runa, was a NUSA representative at the FISU Volunteer Leaders Academy in 2020, a World University Games participant in swimming in Italy 2019, a three-time Sri Lanka University Games record holder, represented Sri Lanka in open water swimming at the FINA World Series and the Asian Open Water Championships, and also is the former Sri Lanka schools record holder in the 400 meters individual medley. Ladies and gentlemen, the moderator for the day, Mr. Mevan Induruwa.
Thank you, Devni. So now we shall move into a Q&A session with the panelists. So since we have concluded all the presentations of the panelists, the questions will be directed as follows. So we'll have direct questions which will be directed to a particular panelist, but of course the other panelists can contribute in any way or any form or manner. And we'll have some general questions that all the panelists can give their input for. So the first question I would like to ask is from Mr. Kaushal Manawadu. So, Mr. Manawadu, what were the biggest challenges that you faced when it came to managing time for both academics and sports?
So, if I'm talking about my personal challenges, actually I was really lucky to get into the University of Sri Jawatanpura because it is situated in the capital city like Colombo and everything. We had all the infrastructure that is needed for swimming. I'm a swimmer. So we had the infrastructure for swimming, for strength training. We had the gyms and everything. We had the ground for doing physical training and everything. So in training perspective, I was okay in my personal experiences. I could do everything that I wanted. But there are challenges which are inevitable. Like if there are like quick timetable changes, yes, if you are training in a proper plan, you might have to adjust everything. You might have to adjust your strength training to a different day, which will affect your final outcome of peaking your training or tapering your training towards a competition. It might be affected because of some inevitable changes. And the other thing would be funding. If I'm talking on behalf of all the sportsmen. Again, I was lucky in that because I was recruited from Sri Lanka Navy to swim as to represent Sri Lanka Navy as a swimmer. And I know in most of the sports that is being offered by Tri-Forces, and I personally know that you were employed from the Sri Lanka Army as well as a swimmer. So, but some students or some sports doesn't get that opportunity. Some sportsmen. So funding will be the biggest problem for other sportsmen if it is that they have to spend on food and nutrition and everything while continuing their sport. And if your university don't have the needed infrastructure, but I know now Sri Lanka universities have developed a lot in the last 10 to 15 years, as I heard. So the infrastructure has been built in every university. So it is actually very, very much less challenges that you're facing, in my opinion. Yet you have to fight against that if any timetable change would occur, or you might have to change according to that.
Thank you, Mr. Manawadu. So when it comes to like changing your schedules, have you had a lot of challenges with?
Yes, because if I'm planning for a competition, let's say now my competition is from another 4 to 5 weeks, there are certain biomotor abilities that my coach and my personal training plan would be looking at. Maybe in endurance you are looking at anaerobic endurance. Sorry, I'm talking about with the technical terms. Maybe anaerobic endurance you are looking at, but if a timetable change occurred during those days and you couldn't train for 2-3 days, then ultimately Professor Tharaka would agree, like your anaerobic capacity would go down from up to a certain extent if you don't train for 72 hours, your anaerobic endurance. So then you might have to go for your general endurance again. That is a bigger problem that you will be facing. So those challenges were there. So I had to do different things. Now you could you saw in the last 3 to 4 months what the world athletes were doing due to the COVID-19 pandemic. They were training at home. You don't need the exact training center. You may be a athlete or you may be a marathon athlete, but you could do some exercises. You can design some exercises you can do at home. So those things were done by me as well, got into different situations. But finally, I could manage to do both studies and sports until my university career was over.
Thank you, Mr. Manawadu, for that wonderful input. Sure.
That please.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think as I mentioned, it would be nice if we can introduce special programs for people like Mr. Manawadu who excelled in sports before coming to the university, special programs. And I would say we should thank the COVID situation, because now almost all the state universities are okay with the online teaching, because if we compare the foreign countries, they are having both physical and online courses at the same time. But if somebody wants to participate in sports, I think we should be flexible for provide them to participate on online, or if we can record them, they can see the lectures at a later stage. So by that, if we program the courses in such a way, I think it will be more beneficial for good athletes or the good sports person to do their sports activities without any interruption, and also at the same time they can earn their degrees with good grades.
Thank you, Senior Professor Kalingamudali, for that wonderful input. The next question I would like to ask is from Professor Tharaka. So since we are on the topic of COVID-19 and maintaining a healthy life, how do you think the COVID-19 period has affected or changed the status quo of maintaining a healthy lifestyle nowadays?
I think what you mean by healthy lifestyle is prevention from, say, what you call the disease of sedentary lifestyle. Now, it has affected people in two ways. General public in a different way, and competitive and related athletes in a different way. First, if you look at how it has affected the general public, I will put it like this. Now, if you ask the general public what are the problems, what prevents them from doing exercise, first thing that they would say is, I didn't have time, right? And the other thing is, what makes them unhealthy, and they have a lot of other food items, and so the COVID period was, I would say, it's a blessing in disguise, because you have enough time. You are home, and usually it was a terrible situation where people lost their livelihood and all that. But if I say a paid worker, government paid worker, most of my friends where I am working with, so you have a lot of time. So you can easily incorporate at least a core body strengthening exercise for schedule for your time. So it's in a way, so people could adapt to that. And then obviously, if you look at the risk factors for hypokinetic diseases, like for example smoking, alcohol, fast food, high calorie diet. So that is also, I would say, a protective factor, because the shops are closed and liquor shops are closed, and some people in fact work doing gardening, right? So they should have more exercise. So I think it was if you think that what in sports psychology we consider now what we call locus of control, that is, you consider you can control your game. That is called the locus of control. So you might say, okay, because other people look good, I lost. So they were doing this, therefore I couldn't perform. So if you take the locus of control to yourself, you are the person who is controlling. If you put it in that way, you could have done a lot as a layperson or general public to improve your health. I think many people, in fact, did that, right? So I think if you, obviously, if you are affected by infection, obviously very small percentage was affected by that. So I was pretty much joking, like for every comment that you make on COVID in a social network site, if you do 10 sit-ups or something, you would end up, after 6 months, you end up with a six-pack abdomen or something like that. Right? So that is how it happens. Now, for athletes, competitive athletes, it was, I would say, it was almost a disaster, because now even if you do your strength and conditioning, other what we call the general physical fitness improvements, if you want to do sports-specific physical, improve your sports-specific physical fitness and the techniques, you will, like, only the very elite athletes and professional athletes would have access to, as Mr. Manawadu said, such facilities. So what will happen is you will end up with losing your psychomotor coordination. Certain amount you will lose. There are two ways that you can adapt for it. One thing is, at least if you are as university athletes, obviously what you can do is, even if you do not have access, now I think the gyms are opening up and the pools are opening up. So if you can maintain your strength and conditioning, and if you get access to this running or something, if you can maintain your aerobic fitness, that will help. Other thing is, which is a high tech, not many people do it except very professional athletes, what you call mental imagery. You keep your mental imagery and keep the routines in place. So I would say it has affected badly, very badly for competitive athletes, but general public, they don't have experience.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Thank you, Professor Tharaka. That was definitely, something that definitely happened during the COVID-19 period. So one more question based on the COVID-19 influence, and that would be directed to Senior Professor Kalingamudali. How do you think the governing bodies should change the administration when it now in a new era, in the post-COVID era? How would the administration change with slight health regulations, and how would organizing sports be affected nowadays?
Yes, at university level it is affected much, but in international arena I think everything is happening. I don't know the reason, but it is not that easy. Even I was discussing this with the Vice Chancellor to start sports activities at Kelania. According to the government rules, we are not allowed, because I don't think it is practicable to have practices with mask and everything. But I think he is the best person to answer that question, because his background is medicine. But to my knowledge, I think it's not that easy to have it. But in foreign countries, I have seen everything is happening, but the spectators are not there. But the games are going on and everything is happening. So even now, I think in Sri Lanka, it's almost controlled to what we have seen. So I think we can start activities.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you.
You want to add something to that? I don't know.
I would say to minimize sports person can take their precautions. I think most of gymnasia, for example, sports venues have protocols to do that. For example, if you, rather than touching your face, you can have a big wrist towel or something. You can wipe that. So you use sports equipment using hand, but obviously that exchanges between the opposition, for example, racket sport, for example. But still, you can prevent such things individually. I think we need a sort of each sports center can make their bottom-up patient make their own rules and regulations, because we know now, we are experts in, all of our experts in how it transmits and everything. So just to cater to that particular need, we can apply like small scale precautionary measures and do it. But then obviously without spectators, sports industry cannot run. I think Narein would be the good person to say that. I think he will give later on his insight into it. So it's very difficult to run a sports industry. In the US Open, without spectators, you can't give the same prize money, right? So,
do you have anything to say about that, Doctor?
Yes, that's a good example. I think these days we are watching the bubble, call it the bubble. The NBA, the National Basketball Association, the premier tournament there, and we all know the basketball players. So they go into a bubble, and it is controlled. So anybody, they cannot come in or go out without. If they leave, they can't come back, or they are going to quarantine, etc. So that's a big situation, or a very tight situation. And in terms of health, in that sense, a lot of teams are struggling with being in the bubble. Some teams are thriving, and some teams are falling down. So they are mentally, they are finding it very difficult to cope with the bubble or be isolated from the outside. Teams like the Milwaukee Bucks went down and the Miami Heat are now winning through. So the resiliency, the mental toughness, and how you cope it and how the support mechanisms are much more important right now. And in terms of spectators, I think now they have virtual spectators. I think they have the whole bubble is the arena is, but it's not the same. You have the arena sounds. We saw the Diamond League Athletics also now when they are running, they have the crowd noise and things like that. So all those factors. At any level, I think the mental aspect as much as the physical aspect is essential.
Thank you, Dr. Narein Perera. That was, definitely true. Looking at the international arena and what we are going through, it's slightly different, but different countries have adopted new and improved measures to combat the situation. So the next question I would like to ask is on the lines of transitioning from sports to a career to a job, and it's a general question which anyone of you could answer. Would you like to comment on the employability of a sportsman who has no internship, no experience in internship, when compared to a non-sportsman who has interned at some level?
Yeah, so if I take that on, I think I mentioned that I think there are certain factors that are inculcated in a sports person. And that is important. I think that even in the recommendations, myself and Mr. Ratnaputri always write, is we specify that they have done sports, they are leaders, they are team players, and so forth. Right? As we as the university community, always we get this stick from the private sector, etc. These guys are not employable. They are stuck in their ways. They are within a framework. In that sense, we know that if you are in a certain frame or you're stuck in your ways, you cannot do sport. You learn. If you are not willing to learn, you cannot grow. In that sense. So in that sense, if you can say that you are you have a representation in some form of sport, I think you are a step up. And in personal experience also, I think it's no longer the factor, but a sportsman was always given the best jobs. My pater was at the Ceylon Tobacco. All the cricketers, I think Arunathan Nakon, you name it, they were recruited to the top jobs in the top firms. I think still it can be the same, because it's the way you go about your sport, and if you can show your mettle in that way, the people who are absorbing you also are more, more at rest. So I think you have an advantage there.
Definitely. Yes.
That
yes.
as well, please. Yeah, I think I'm totally agree with him. And if you take jobs in government sector, you may be correct to some extent. It would be better to have internship. But if you consider the private sector, I think even I discussed this with many private organizations, especially if you take the state university graduates. What they are saying is, I'm not talking about the people who are involved in sports, for the other people. They are saying the attitudes of the state university graduates are very bad. But if they do sports, they will learn their leadership qualities. They will improve their leadership qualities and teamwork, which is an essential for working in the outside world. And if you are an entrepreneur or if you are looking for a government employment, I think that may not be very relevant. But if you're involved in team sports, especially, you will build up the teamwork and team ability, how to work as a team, which is very important, especially for the private sector. It's important for the government sector, but in government sector, I think more or less the job is guaranteed. Even if you take academic position, once you're recruited and if you have a postgraduate qualification, you can stay there until your 60th birthday. Nobody can sack you. That is very bad. But it's a privilege enjoyed by the Sri Lankan academics, I would say.
Thank you, Senior Professor.
Excuse me, Mevan. Dear audience,
thank you. This is to Senior Professor Kalingamudali. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. Of course, all of you, thank you so much. Regarding your presentation, I think there are very good suggestions you have quoted there, particularly in Sri Lanka still we don't have the synchronized academic calendar for the academic program. But as you mentioned, for the sports, of course, it's a nice idea you have given. Why don't you try to materialize through pushing you being as a dean, I think, for the science faculty in University of California, through the standing committees or whatever the possible ways. Even the vice chairman is from University of California. So why don't you give a push to the UGC to get to implement that idea of having sports a week or a month in the university system as well as practiced in the school system, because that is also mandate, as you all are telling, the sports in the universities. Those who are involving in sports, they find difficulties to match them with to manage with the academic calendar, getting the leaves, medical submit, many things and all to get them involved in the sports, whereas the other students are just left behind and they don't get even interest in getting the sports. So if you make that in the system as a regularized one, as a week, sports week or the sports month, so the SLUs also can take some steps to emphasize or to write that to the UGC, but the people like you in the academic system, in the administrative, carry all the caliber. Why don't you try to implement that through the UGC or to the government?
Yes, definitely I will do that, because I'm the chairman of the advisory board since 2014.
Oh.
I know all the difficulties faced by the students who participated from California.
Oh.
And the vice chairperson, Senior Professor Janitha Liyanage, is a good friend of mine. His room is next to my one at California. And also I think we have the chairman, Senior Professor Sampath Amarasunga is one time the chairman of the Sports Advisory Board and chairman of SLUSA.
Exactly.
And I know him also very personally. I already discussed with my Vice Chancellor. So I will request her to discuss this at CVCD, as well as I will personally talk to Professor Janitha as well as Professor Sampath on this matter. I'm sure, because even the Professor Janitha is a colors women at schools and universities. So I'm sure they will help. If we ask for 2 weeks something,
even, yeah.
I think if you can support that from SLUSA to the UGC, I will do my best from my side as the dean as well as on my personal contacts.
Please, because now the environment is exactly right, because the chairman, the vice chairman, and even now the Professor Janitha was telling that the government now, the UGC is ready to have a sports university itself.
Yes.
So why can't we, before that, why can't we take that in the system, which is existing system? Thank you so much, Senior Professor.
I will try my best to convince the administrators.
Please.
At the same time, you also can request your vice chancellors
Definitely
to discuss this at CVCD, because that is the best place. I will personally talk to them. I'm sure they will agree on this.
Please. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was definitely an interesting discussion. Yes, Dr.
If I can add to that, in terms of the sports university, I think myself and the Moderator University is involved in the project directly. I think you mentioned something very important, that is, even in terms of sports and sportsmen coming into university, we have to think differently rather than, I know we have sports focused programs in Jayawardenepura and Saparakamu, but then I think all of us here medicine to, so we should be able to go on our desired path, but still practice as an elite athlete. I think that is important. Recently, we had a meeting with the new sports minister who I happened to coach when he was playing for college. So his idea was also that, rather than isolating a sportsman and pushing them into a career which they don't want to, why can't they be mainstream like the US colleges, etc.? They should be mainstream and still be elite. So when I was first playing for my country, I had a all-black coach, right, Jeff Matheson, right? He was an all-black prop forward. And when I wanted to pull out, I was a student, I was a schoolboy, so I wanted to pull out of the Asiad squad to do my A-levels. He said, why are you doing that? The captain, first World Cup winning captain, David Kirk from New Zealand, is a doctor. I said, why are you doing that? So these guys have been able to balance everything. Don't do that. You have to do both. So I think that mentality must be there. The sportsman is not inferior in terms of other factors. The background must be set for us to achieve in all ways,
And also, I'm happy to say that even the sports minister also presently a sportsman, a player. So I think it's rather easy for us, even if it's go to the cabinet level even, to make it happen as a sport week or whatever the things. So now it's a very conducive environment we have. So we'll let the sleuths and all the other people try for this place. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Actually, can I take 2 minutes? I'm from Motto University,
Yeah.
Actually, I also want to ask what the Sudath President asked you all, because I have seen this thing a lot of times, where when we get a time, we talk about the common calendar and everything. This is not just about the common calendar. In most of the universities, it's differently treated for sports in all the manners. I mean, this is not because Sampath is there or sports minister is sportsman. That, as university, we should have a common policy to, treat for sports. So that actually, I think, we people, why this game should get together and make the policy. Because, if our vice chancellor is a sportsman, he will support sports. But there are some other vice chancellors who will not have sports, they will not support that university. That we have seen, I have seen about 25 years now. So this is a good forum where we can talk to make a policy for university sports. I'm really happy that Manawadu wrote one thing, because he told us that now the university sportsmen should think about winning international events. Because so far I have seen that everyone just want to go and show their friends or outsiders that I have represented universities in World University Games. But that is not the thing that will happen here. I mean, all these top sportsmen try to get the international things, right? That is a very good point that Kumar gave, showed us. But my main concern is making a common policy for all universities. We have seen it throughout these 20 to 30 years. Thank you.
Yeah, I think what we should request is a directive from the UGC to have 2 weeks specially allocated in a common time frame for university games. Because if they want to have common calendar, I don't think it will happen very soon, but they are working for that. Irrespective of the student activities and other stuff, they are thinking of going for a common calendar for the better benefit of the whole country. But if it is a directive from UGC, then I think every university have to adhere to that. That means to allocate that 2 weeks, irrespective of their academic calendar, what they have already planned for the sports activities. So that I think we should ask from the UGC to implement.
Okay, that was definitely an interesting conversation. And since we are running out of time, I would like to give the opportunity to the audience to ask. Just we can probably accommodate one question. If the audience, maybe the students, would like to ask any one of the panelists a question regarding what they have spoken about.
Thank you. I'm Mahela from, I'm a graduate from University of Pune. So I was the student ambassador for Sri Lanka in FISU on 2018-19. So when I was representing Sri Lanka in many international programs hosted by FISU, there was a major difference between the graduates from, sport graduates from Sri Lanka and other countries. When I was representing Sri Lanka, I was 24 years old doing my bachelor's. But at the same age, from other countries, I observed there were master students and PhD students, also PhD holders. So I see like there is a gap of education system in Sri Lanka. So I would like to ask, what are your suggestions to eliminate or to minimize this gap of being a bachelor for 24 or 25 years old? Thank you.
Would any of the panelists like to say something?
Okay, I'm also talking on this problem in many occasions and many forums. One of my batchmates went for his PhD in 1993. His PhD supervisor was younger than my batchmate. This was in 1993. But I think we can't blame only for the government or the policymakers or the administrators. I blame the students also, because even if we fix the academic calendar, due to student unrest, we have to change the academic calendars constantly. This time it is a different situation, but usually when we fix it, we have to change it because of the student unrest. But now I think most of the administrators are thinking of having a fixed calendar, irrespective of all the activities, even if the students are on strike. So this may be another issue for the university system. We will consider that the time has been utilized and we will go for the fixed calendar. And in addition to that, I think even in the UGC side, they are thinking of advance the enrollment, because at the moment, this year, I think students have waited more than 20 months at home after finishing their A-levels before coming to the university. So it's partly it's a problem of the system, and I think more than 50% is because of the student behavior. So I think we must discuss this with the student union as well, because I am a person who studied in the university system for 7 years due to the political unrest of the country. I was in my 4th year for 4 years as an undergraduate.
Would any of the other panelists like to add anything to what Senior Professor?
The way forward is to intake has to be early, and if we go for common semester system, 2 semesters per year, then you will have a long, what is equivalent to a summer break. So that is the period that you can slot university games and this 2-week, whatever the period. So if we can achieve that, I think that would be the best. Early intake and then have proper semester system where, because the semester system has made people to say they come to the semester exams, they study hard. So we always see this, they study hard, they forget everything, and then they come back and start playing and they get injured because they are not conditioned. So they get repeated, we always see the repeated injuries of the university level athletes, because when an athlete is 24 years, he's becoming older, he's not young for an athlete in that sense. So what will happen is they are more prone to injuries, and you always see this poor conditioning, strength and conditioning, they will get more injuries. So I think we have to have proper timetable to prevent most of these things.
Anything else that must be added? So I think since we are constrained with time, I believe that we must conclude with the panel discussion. I would like to thank the audience for bearing with us for such a lengthy discussion, but I'm pretty sure that everyone would have learned something new about some very trending topics in university sport and sport as a whole. So I would like to thank our panelists for everything that they have given, like their input and their information. So I would like to conclude this session. Over to you, Devani.
Thank you, Mevan. With this, we move on to the presentation of tokens of appreciation for our panelists. Not to do the honors, I would like to invite the President Lusa, Senior Lecturer, Eastern University, Sri Lanka, Dr. Chandrakanta Mahindranathan, and she would be accompanied by the Assistant Secretary, SLUSA, Instructor, Physical Education, University of Ruhuna, Mr. Anusha Nirmal de Silva. And also, I would like to invite the Recorder SLUSA, Acting Director, Physical Education, University of Kelaniya, Mr. GGU Saman Kumara, to do the honors. Presenting the first token of appreciation to Professor S.R.D. Kalingamudali. Professor Tharaka Dissanayake. Dr. Narein Perera. And finally, Mr. Kaushal Manawadu.